Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's Board of Adjustment meeting and Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for August the 3rd, 2017. First order of business, just to remind everyone that anyone that wants to speak tonight, make sure to approach the podium and state their name, and so we can get it on the recording a little bit better than we have in the past, so thank you for your cooperation. First order of business tonight will be our Board of Adjustment meeting. And we'll have a public hearing, 1005 Bush Drive, variance -38. Mr. Hampton, you want to address that?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This is a variance approval request for 1005 Bush Drive, VAR-38. On June the 30th, 2017, a request for variance approval was filed with Planning and Zoning. Monty Cannon, care of Cannon Builders, Inc., is requesting a variance to allow part of an existing residential structure, approximately 2 foot by 22 foot, to be within the required 30-foot setback area. The property is located on Lot 82, Plat 2, Field of Dreams subdivision, and the property is zoned R3, high density residential. I'd like to ask to make part of the public hearing record the municipal code by reference, my planning and zoning report, and the public hearing notice. And the applicant is here if you have any specific questions for them.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton.
You're welcome.
Anyone else here to speak tonight during the public hearing?
Mr. Barton, Mr. Deach, Mrs. Scott.
Hearing
Mr.
none, we'll close our
Costello,
public
and
hearing.
Dean Durbin.
And open up our regular Board of Adjustment meeting. First order of business will be the minutes from the December 3rd, 2015 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the December 3rd, 2016 meeting as submitted.
I'll second it.
You're not on it.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
I thought it was in the meeting.
Huh?
I thought I was there.
Oh, no, we're talking Board of
This is-
Adjustment, sorry, Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I should have.
I'm sorry. I missed it.
Mr. Deach was there.
Yes.
You want to second that?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Deach to approve the minutes from the last Board of Adjustment meeting from December 2015. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Scott,
I abstain, I was absent.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Durbin,
I think I was here that meeting, was I? I wasn't? Okay, then I guess I abstain.
I don't.
Mr. Barton.
You were not one of the members.
No, I was not one on the, no, I was not on it.
Okay.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
and Mr. Deach.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0 with 2 abstentions. Regular business will be the variance that we just heard in the public hearing, 1005 Bush Drive, variance -38.
Well, I guess I have a question, and I'm not real sure who it's for. But obviously this is something that wasn't caught during the building process, so, the city does inspections, correct?
Yes. The
So-
city does not have a land surveyor or do survey work to verify location of stuff, but the city went out to make sure that the foundation was poured with the right amount of steel in it, that the walls were built per spec, that kind of stuff, but we do not go out and measure the location of structures on the sites, no ma'am.
So you don't measure to see if the foundation that's poured is what was platted?
Do we go out and physically measure around the
Yes.
houses? No, we do not.
I mean, if it says it's a 10-foot garage, you don't measure to see that it's a 10-foot garage?
That's not typical procedure to measure the dimensions of all the structures, no ma'am.
I have a question. It's very similar to Ms. Scott's question. I'd like to know maybe how all this came about. I guess my question's directed to the builder. How do you find yourself in this particular situation?
Yes, state your name, sir, for the record, thank you.
My name's Monty Cannon with Cannon Builders.
Thank
To
you.
explain the process that we went through, we submitted plans with the intention of making this fit within the 30-foot setback. Our normal house is the width that is actually in the field. It was intended to cut off 2 feet and then build it that way. In the process of having the foundation put in, the foundation guy probably didn't pick up the dimension and put it in the way it was, we normally do it. And then the carpenter built on top of it. So it's an error on our part, but it's really kind of an honest error. It wasn't done with the intention to build over the line, and it wasn't caught until they did an outbound survey when we get ready to close the loan.
And the house with the extra width on it actually would have fit on the lot
No.
had it been adjusted to the side. Is that not right?
No, we needed, it was as much as that lot would handle,
Okay.
and it was tight. And
So
we
that was
knew
what
that from the
varied your
beginning.
plan?
It's got a 3rd-car garage on it, which ends the width of the home a little bit. And putting the 3rd car on it is what gives us the additional dimension. The 3rd car was supposed to have been 2 feet narrower than what our normal plans call for, which still would work as a 3rd-car garage, it just been a little bit tighter. But in the process of getting it laid out, either staked, either dug, either the foundation, but once the foundation was poured, then the carpenter didn't check that dimension whether, and those guys aren't in on what we were trying to accomplish at the end goal. So the error really is probably on our part by not conveying down the ladder to make sure that it was done properly in the feet. Now, the end result is we got houses 2 feet into a 30-foot setback. It's on a corner lot. So you've got 28 feet of the 30 feet setback for visibility, for traffic to come out of the corner and see whether there's cars coming or not. It doesn't block that visibility. It's not a visibility issue. It's strictly, we've encroached into that setback, and we obviously shouldn't have and wish we wouldn't have, but here we are. So our options are either to come to you and ask for variance or go back and cut off 2 feet of the house.
I went out and looked at that house today, and it's a nice house, and I would agree with you that it's where it is situated on the lot. It does not block any visibility one way or the other, either on Warrior Drive or on the bush.
And I guess it's a good situation of which side of the lot it encroaches on. It encroaches on the city's 30-foot setback. There are some places, I'm sure, that maybe you only have a 25-foot setback. This particular one is 30. The other side is properly placed so that there's the proper distance between this house and the next house. So it's not that we're encroaching on the next house or the next neighbor or something like that. The encroachment is in the city easement area only.
Who actually staked the dig?
Be
Fitch and Associates.
Fitch?
Fitch and Associates out of Troy.
So they're a surveyor that
So,
you
yes.
use
Mhm.
for that purpose. So the plan that they staked from, would it have been the plan as this plat that was turned into the city prior to construction would have been shown, or was it the oversized plan
Well,
that as built?
This is a house that we built many times. It's one of our inventory type homes. So we probably had paperwork to him that says to build, I don't know what plan is it? Freeport plan on lot 82. So he goes to his inventory of measurements and goes stakes that. Now, we can't even tell you if he staked it. I'm going to assume that he staked it properly, and then when the guy dug it, you're talking 2 feet width, and they're digging with an 8-foot wide bucket, so they can get off fairly. They cut a trough this wide, and then the foundation comes back and places the footing. I'm going to guess it's in the placement of the footing probably not in the staking, probably not in the digging, but the foundation guy probably had a set of prints that we've done 50 times. His probably didn't carry a note, or he didn't look at the note on the plan that says only build this portion of the foundation 8 feet wide rather than 10 feet wide.
So the plan would have been identical to the way you'd normally build it with a note.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I'm familiar with the staking process, I'm familiar with the overdig process. Obviously, the whole point of having a surveyor do the stakeout is to know
Sure.
that you're within setbacks.
Sure.
But you're saying that there isn't actually a separate drawing to build this house with the garage width as intended to fit. They just worked off of the wider 12-foot garage with a note that they should have stayed within the setback.
And that note and that correspondence probably didn't work its way down to the foundation.
Is there any, it would seem to me that prior to pouring, there would be, somebody responsible to sign off and make sure before you go vertical that you're not over particularly when you're dealing with a corner lot.
And there's not,
They're pretty much relying on that surveyor to have the stakes staked in the right spot.
Just
Like
for
he was saying, they
purposes-
dug that.
Hold on a sec, just for purposes, if you're gonna speak, if you go to the podium and state your name, just so we can make sure the
okay,
record's clear.
what Steve's saying is that, say it again.
Steve, can you
Just
just step up, sir?
Yeah, I just wanna make
Yeah.
sure we
Don't
can
be shy.
record.
Yeah,
It's just us.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Steve Darnell with Cannon Builders.
Thank you, Steve.
And it basically is, they overdig that, so the foundation guy is going off that stake.
Right.
So there's 3 foot overdig, so he's probably thinking we crowded it short. So he was going off, it'd fit with that overdig in there. And it goes back to the same question you was asking with the city. The city don't know, they're relying on them stakes being in the spot they should be. And it'd almost be impossible for them to check that without a land survey on your guys' side. I don't blame the city at all. The last couple that we've done, yes, they've been checking to make sure everything's right. And so, to answer your question, they are changing steps to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, and I don't think you gentlemen necessarily would know this, but we had a variance request on a home that I believe was a Cannon home in the last couple of years. This home was built quite some time back, and it was in I don't know if it was on Squaw Court or it was over in the old Tomahawk subdivision, kind of over behind the library, near where the county administration building is. So we had a variance request on what at that point in time was a home that had been lived in by at least one family. They were selling the home to another buyer, and in the process of going through the title, insurance, and the surveys and all that, that home was discovered to be built in the setback. And if I remember correctly, it was the rear lot setback, not a side lot setback. But, so this is now the second Cannon-built home that, in my time on this P&Z, that we've had a home that was built, and that one was considerably more open.
Did they add anything to that house that made that?
No, this was as originally constructed. It was inside the setback. So in that particular case, if I remember correctly, we granted the variance on the basis that it met the criteria for variance. The biggest issue of which is at least in my opinion, is the hardship, is the issue something created by the applicant. In this case, the applicant, the existing owner that was trying to sell the home, had nothing to do with where that home was placed when it was built or anything like that. The difficulty I have in this instance is, the very first question we have to ask in going through our variance criteria is the need for the variance a result of the actions of the applicant? And, in my opinion, it is. Yeah. Granted, it's a mistake, but it's still the actions of the applicant. And my concern is that there needs to be something on the part of every contractor to make sure you're within the setbacks. Otherwise, I don't see how we as a city can enforce setbacks. And, you know, I'm kind of at a loss. You know, that building a home's a fairly major undertaking, and staking it in the right location and doing a double check before you go vertical seems to me, if I were in the construction business, it would be something I think I would want to do.
Well, I don't have any particulars on the other house. You're saying it's a Cannon-built house. I assume it is if you're saying it is, but I don't know any of the particulars on that. Wasn't involved in that. It's a human process here, and we've got human error. It's an error on our part. It's communication error probably more than anything. We have two options before us as builder for the position that we sit here, is to request a variance from you and try to explain that it's and I know the cities don't like to give variance because, you're here asking for 2 feet, the next person asks for 4 feet, and where do you stop the process? But that's our option, is to request a variance. It's not in an area that hinders sight. It's not in an area that hinders anyone's usability of ground around it. And our other option is to take 2 feet off the house. So that's why we're here.
Well, the remedy is not an easy one. I understand that. But the very first consideration we have to give in a variance, and in the packet, I think you were provided with what the criteria for variance are when you went through the application process. So, the first one out of the gate is the need for the variance does not arise out of the actions of the applicant. I can't even get past that one before I begin to consider the other ones. And as I said, I know the remedy is harsh. If you don't get a variance, the only remedy is probably pretty expensive. But at the same time, I feel like if our variance process is going to have any validity, we either live by the standards or we don't. And you're asked, for us to grant a variance, in my opinion, would be for us to completely abdicate the standard. That's my feeling. I don't know what the rest of you feel.
Okay, well, I can see your point there on the fact that we can't just randomly give, these variances, but in the factor of, we're sitting here in a town that has a reputation that is starting to come around. We're starting to get a lot better feed from people. I would hope that we would think about the repercussions that, I know it's financially for him and they can do it, but I think I can see where maybe we need a little flexibility because of the fact that they didn't do it intentionally, and I'm sure from now on, they're going to be very diligent about making sure that they don't have this problem. I would just like to think, especially considering where this particular, it's not like it was going into the other person's house next door, and since we're at a point, it's strictly, and it is a corner lot, which makes it a little bit easier to live with. I just think we have to think seriously about going along with this particular variance.
Well, then that was my point, which is you're basically saying we're going to ignore and not apply the standard and grant a variance, but we fully recognize that it doesn't meet the standard for a variance. And to me, that brings the integrity of the process into question. I'm sorry whether some people would take it as what you refer to as reputation of the city or working with the city, but builders are in the business of getting things right, and tape measures matter, and I just don't know how we disregard our standard and then expect our standard to have any standing the next time we have a variance come forward.
and I've been debating with myself over this since I opened this packet up. Really, you can, A, B, D, and E, you can kind of, that you can justify it. C, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. And since Chris is here, I'm assuming maybe he might have some input into that.
Well, we have this criteria that's set forth that's supposed to define, really it's the case law that defines what a variance, what an undue hardship to the applicant is. And just going through it, you have, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, building involved, which are not applicable to other lands. It is a corner lot. Maybe that's a special circumstance you could stretch. We've kind of stretched that before.
I was gonna say, we had that one up on
Yeah,
Lagoon Field.
yeah, I think that was for a fence.
No,
right?
it was,
Oh,
no,
it was for this.
the fence was over,
But that's why we did it on the fence, I think. Did we deny it or
yeah,
grant
we
it?
denied that one on Dudley,
Okay.
but it was a visibility issue.
Yeah, visibility issue. Literal interpretation of the provision of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed to the other properties in the same district under the terms of the chapter. I think, Ms. Scott, we could probably stretch something in there, because we have to write a findings of fact on it.
Right, he can't sell it, so that's
Right.
a right that's enjoyed by everyone else.
Literal interpretation would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this chapter, kind of similar to what you said. And, I mean, the biggest one is, the special conditions and circumstances did not result from the actions of the applicant. And I think what that's really intended to do is, a situation like this, it's that you can't put yourself in a situation to get a variance, because, that was a Cannon home. It was a home you built a long time, or Cannon builders built a long time ago, but, part of the thing is, regarding, being consistent, make sure builders respect the setbacks and truly don't build in it, but, that probably could have been just a mistake. Granting the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this chapter of the owners of the other land structures or buildings in the same district. I look at that and say, well, you are permitting them, you're giving them something which is 2 feet into the setback. It's not significant, but if you follow the strict letter of the ordinance, it's hard to reach, I think, 2 of the criteria. I think we can kind of manipulate the language, but I think, Scott has a good point that we have this criteria and you apply the facts to the criteria, how do you end up in the result you want to do? I mean, I do think it's a legitimate concern to say, how are we going to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And the question was asked, whether or not that, it would never be, when we inspect a property, we don't inspect it to protect him, we don't inspect it to protect the buyer of the property, we inspect it for the general health and safety and welfare. Because otherwise, if we miss something in inspection, people could come back and sue all the time. And that's just the law in Missouri. We don't inspect it for them or for the buyer of the property. We're not giving any warranty or guarantee. So it ultimately 100% is on the builder to make sure they're within the setbacks. So, I mean, I think everybody's struggling with the concept on this because you're talking 2 feet going into the setback, but you're also talking our criteria, and you guys have traditionally held very strictly to the criteria. It's one of those tough call ones because I don't know, is there anybody thinks that it can meet all the criteria? I don't know if they've presented a case to say it meets the criteria or even address the criteria, but there is the general idea, like Dan said, that, they're 2 feet over, it's a corner lot. Mr. Deach said, I was over there, it's not a visibility issue. It's a tough one to call. I mean, I'm not voting.
Well, I don't.
And I'd like to add
Go ahead,
one
sir.
quick thing I should have mentioned earlier when Teresa was asking me about it. Since this application has come before us and the building department's been made aware, we have physically went out and measured every house that we've issued a permit for this year to make sure dimensions match. When I answered you, my statement was we did not do that. That was not our normal procedure previously. We have measured them all now, and I'm sure in the future we will take the extra time to at least take a tape measure and maybe catch, oh, this is 2 feet longer, and could have brought it to whose ever attention right away and try to figure a solution before you've got a completed house. So we have tweaked our procedure, but to make sure my answer was clear to the Board of Adjustment, that was not a standard procedure for the city, and we do not have survey equipment and the records of what crosses or property corners, whatever they're using to stake their houses, that is definitely not what I feel is the responsibility of the building department.
Well, then to kind of feed off of that point, so you're measuring, say, the foundation, the subfloor, whatever. Are you also measuring the distance to the setback? Are you measuring that it is in fact within the setback? or are you
We
only
don't have,
measuring-
we don't have the proper equipment to measure
That's what
when
I
it's meeting
thought.
setback.
Right.
When they pop the farms off, or in some of these cases, the houses have been
Right.
built,
So-
we're taking the tape and walking around the concrete foundation and seeing
It
is
matches the
something
plan.
right or wrong.
Right.
And
So-
if there's something different, we've brought it to their, to
So
the
if this
attention.
house had been built, say, with the 10-foot wide garage, but it had still been staked inside
We would
the
not have
setback,
caught it.
You would not have caught,
No, sir.
the only way you'd catch it under this circumstance is,
If a dimension
You
is
just said-
off.
hey, this is 12 feet for this garage, but your plan says 10.
In real world, something might be a couple inches here or there. It'd be, we're realistic looking for feet.
Well, and what I'm trying to establish is that what you do today might have caught this, but it wouldn't guarantee that if a house were actually situated within a setback, the building department wouldn't necessarily catch it, because the building department would just be looking at whether the existing dimensions were true to the plan.
That's true. It could be the exact dimension of the plot plan, but if it accidentally got shifted over one way or the other, yeah, it would be with the equipment we're provided, and we would not be able to catch that, no, sir.
And, gentlemen, when we ratified our minutes from the previous meeting, we don't have variance requests very often. Our last Board of Adjustment meeting was in December last year. But that meeting was a variance with regard to a setback for a house that was proposed to be built, not one that was in fact already existing. But the request was to allow the construction of a home that didn't fit within the existing setbacks. And the variance was denied on basically the same grounds and same criteria. So you have to understand the position that you're asking us to.
We fully understand that. We truly do.
Is one where, people that we know that had good intentions of building a nice house were told they can't build within a setback, yet here we are with an existing house within a setback that we're being asked to.
We fully understand that we're asking something that pushes comfort level. And I know how it is with city and people asking for changes and variances.
And Mr. Deitch's point is right. I mean, as we drive down Warrior Avenue, I don't think you would ever, as you drive down Warrior Avenue, go, holy cow, that house is really off. I don't think anyone would ever know the difference.
No, so it was forward where it's sitting in front of the other houses, so we try to line them up, then it'd be
Well,
like.
I mean, I can tell you with certainty, if it were the other side where you've got a 5-foot setback in a lot line and a 5-foot setback to the next house, if those houses, instead of being 8 or 10 feet apart, were really 8 feet apart, that's a real issue.
Oh, yeah.
That's a.
That wouldn't meet fire code.
I
Right,
would
that's-
definitely have an issue with that.
Yeah.
So,
Because of any number of things, but the clearance issue, and as Mr. Hampton said, the fire code and all of that would be really difficult to overlook. But my difficulty is, as long as, and I've been on this Board of Adjustment a long time, Mr. Barton even longer, Mrs. Scott's got tremendous experience with it, and a lot of the rest of you have been around long enough to see it in action. And we have tried to be very, very faithful to the criteria, and we have been, I think, very faithful to the criteria. And so to depart from that process, I just feel like compromises, future consideration we may have to give. That's the real heartburn I have with this.
So the one that you're having a problem with is C?
Well, I have an issue with C, and I do also think that granting this would not confer rights and privileges denied to others in the same zone. It does confer rights and privileges denied to others in the same zone. Although oftentimes in the process of issuing a variance, that's almost hard to avoid. But The problem of the applicant's making question is the really tough one to overcome for me.
Because, I mean, was it the applicant's fault or was it the contractor that he,
Well, I think these gentlemen would tell you that the general contractor is responsible for everything every sub does. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's, ultimately, that's how that's applied.
Depending, I mean, no matter how, whichever way you guys vote, I think we can craft something similar to what we've crafted in past when you've granted it, to bring back for you guys to look at and review if you guys decide to grant the variance. If you deny it, and obviously set forth the criteria.
I know the one down by the lagoon field was basically the same type of situation, where it was a corner lot.
Yeah, I'm not remembering that one, but I may not have been here for that meeting. I don't remember. Oh, I know the one you're
The
talking about.
real tall one.
That was like 7 inches out.
It was a corner lot.
Yeah, it was like
got-
7 inches out. Yeah, I remember that one. And it was a story and a half or 2 story, and the house
Right.
was yellow.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had built it, and the way it fit on that corner lot there was, no one caught it that it was, I guess that was in the city. Was it, or it might have been.
Oh, yeah, that's the Canterbury and,
Yeah,
what is that subdivision called?
I don't, that's the one that kind of sticks in my head.
That, and if I remember correctly, that one, the homeowner self-contracted. This is a long time ago, but the homeowner self-contracted, and he had somebody stake it, but he didn't have a professional survey done. That's my recollection of that one. And it was just, like you said, it was just a corner, and I want to say it was like 7 inches into the setback.
Just remember, for the variance to pass, we need 4 votes
Right.
in the affirmative to grant the variance.
Right.
I think
and
you
it-
guys have kind of discussed the criteria. I mean, what questions do you guys have for me? I mean, remember, it's property, so it doesn't really create a legal precedent, but it does, I think, in your minds, out of a sense of fairness, create a precedent. And we talk about previous variances you granted and why you did it and whatnot, and struggling, I think, with, are we going to create a problem where, hopefully we can avoid this from happening again. But, what happens when it's maybe a more serious issue about being in the setback? I think that's something to consider, but legally it doesn't create a precedent. Each parcel of land is unique, consideration of each parcel of land unique, so this doesn't necessarily mean that the next time somebody comes in that builds in the setback that you have to grant it because you granted one here. But, the criteria is what you're supposed to find. It says you shall find these conditions in order to grant it. So, it's one of those that I think you guys just got to discuss if you're comfortable kind of with the idea of granting this variance, knowing that there could be a situation come down the pipe similar to it, and you have to consider a similar issue.
I kind of feel that these gentlemen will definitely they will try their best to never be up here. Next time, I think they'll probably just cut off the 2 foot of the house and go on from there, but I think at this, since we're into the, we're not infringing on the other people's lot next to it, we're not making the houses closer together, I just think that, this is something I think we could live with. We could show that, the consideration we took on it. I'm not saying we're gonna let anybody else do it the next time, but this is something that seemed like it fit the criteria of giving a variance, because sometimes I think we're just a little bit too conservative on what kind of variances that we might give.
Well, the variance criteria is set by ordinance. So you're applying the facts of their case to the criteria set by ordinance. So, it's if you want to look for more flexibility in it, then you probably need to suggest to the board to consider maybe modifying the criteria to allow some more flexibility for your consideration. Because they set that criteria, which is based on the case law on what is an undue hardship.
Kind of C is what I'm struggling with too. So, but I'd really like to be able to justify to myself a way to grant this variance. So, how can we say that C So that's where I'm struggling. That's a special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant.
How can I argue that?
Yeah,
How would I argue that if I was presenting the case on behalf of the builder?
that would be great.
I
yeah.
would say it's not me who I am sitting here presenting this. It was a mistake caused by someone unintentionally that wasn't us, that we're trying to construct it according to the plans.
And that was my point. That I was bringing up.
I mean, but it does create an issue of you could always hide behind the guy
Sure.
in the mask.
Well,
But
yeah,
you guys
that's
can
always the
take,
case.
you guys can take the testimony of the two individuals here tonight. You can assess their credibility, sitting in quasi-judicial roles as to the earnestness or honesty of their presentation, that it was a mistake not by them and their engineer or the surveyor or anything like that. And I think if you assess them to be credible in that explanation, we can come up with some language in the findings of fact and conclusions of law to address that.
So you're basically saying that it was not their intent to sneak around that and add that extra 2 feet in. That was not,
It's a little bit of a legislative interpretation, yes,
but that was not their intent,
right.
and therefore they did not create,
Intentionally create the
they
hardship.
didn't say, go stake it bigger so that
Right.
we can be in this position in 6 months.
I'm just waiting for Scott to say, well, Counselor, you say that, but how do you read that out of this language?
You guys didn't know you had the city attorney working for you, did you?
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, I understand the difficulty and the practicality of this. I mean, I think, and we've always, there's been ones that have met 3 out of 4 criteria easily before, or, you know, that have been right on the cusp of the last piece of criteria, and it's like, I mean, I think what's a little bit different is you really have to stretch all the criteria on this one to really say that there's a variance there. But I understand the concerns. You know, hopefully we've got some things in place, and I'm sure Cannon Builders is going to make sure that this doesn't happen again on any future houses they build, because I'm sure it's not profitable for these guys to be here. But you know, the plain reading of the language of the ordinance is very difficult to me. You know, if you just apply straight law to fact. But that's why you guys are in a quasi-judicial role, because you guys are the finders of whether or not, you know, you can assess credibility. You guys find whether or not the criteria is met. And there's no process that the board oversees that. Ultimately, you guys are the final say on it. So I'm not giving you guys straight answers because it's a tough one to answer.
Because you're an attorney.
That's right.
And, you know, and I'm not trying to devil's advocate this, and I'm certainly not
No,
looking
no, I
for
mean,
a
I-
reason or a way to deny the request. But within criteria C, there is no question or there's no consideration of intent. Intent is really not relevant.
I said
And
it
so-
was an interpretation.
And much the same way is I didn't intend to run that stop sign when I got that ticket.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
It does, it's
And
not
I
like a
think-
criminal statute, which it's an implied knowing element. It's just, I mean, this is really just there's no intent that's necessarily applicable or spelled out in the
Right.
ordinance.
right.
I'm just saying, if you wanted to make an interpretation, you know, on this particular one, it's something you can.
And I agree with you that, you know, this kind of situation is the most difficult kind of situation because it's a circumstance that is already in existence. It's not one where we'd like the blessing to be able to do it. It's the issue already exists. And so, you know, I think it would be nice to know what the Board of Aldermen's, and we have to make a decision on this tonight, but going forward, it would be nice to know what the Board of Aldermen's desire is as far as how faithfully we interpret this. Do they want us to apply judgment and being kind and considerate and all of those things? You know, do we want to look at the fact that the remedy is so much more unpleasant than the problem just remaining as it is? You know, that's the question I think that would be nice to be able to put into play in something like this is the remedy is pretty severe and the existing problem is not that big of a deal. On this particular instance, the problem is not that big of a deal.
Well, that's where I struggled with it, was the fact that The last time we had that variance about the fence over there on AA, we really struggled with that one, because they had already built the fence, and we were struggling whether to make them tear it down. But it came down to, that was an easy one.
Safety, yeah.
It was a safety issue with bicycles and cars, and that was an easy one. It was tearing down the fence and putting it up in its right place. The one over on Lagoon Field was taking down part of the house. It's a little different thing, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the Board of Adjustment is always gonna be a little bit more difficult because, unlike zoning, it doesn't go up to the Board of Aldermen. You guys have the final say. You're sitting in a judicial type role in assessing and applying the law to the facts. And I can tell you, judges don't always apply the law to the facts. Sometimes they take some equitable application to some stuff. And but if you go back, originally, our variance procedure said, undue hardship, blah, 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 which was out of the statute. And there was some desire to say, we need more guidelines on this. So we went to the case law and said, what are the guidelines the court lays out for granting variances? And that's what we put in there. And we looked at other cities to say, so you guys had some guidelines and kind of knew where it was. But then when you put the guidelines in there and you hold strict to the guidelines, you struggle with, these situations that are maybe a little bit more not as offensive, but you then have other considerations about what happens next time. And, we don't want to create a precedent, and we don't want to, create a situation. Obviously, the biggest fear is you don't want to create a situation, which I don't think is happening here, where they're doing it on purpose and then coming back and asking for forgiveness later. I don't think that's the intent. I don't think that's what anybody's trying to. I don't think anybody believes that. Right. So that's, I think, if the Board of Adjustment was sitting here and believed that they intentionally did this to put 5 feet in the setback, I think it would be a different situation. Right. But they don't have the intent. You're right, Scott, that intent is not spelled out there. I absolutely agree. But ultimately, the Board of Aldermen does not review your decisions, and somebody would have to challenge in court if you granted or denied the variance, And I think you guys have always been a Board of Adjustment that has wanted to follow the ordinance and the language of the ordinance and honor the strict nature of it. And I do think it is, we've had some board members comment from time to time, where did this criteria come from? Why is there this very strict criteria? And I always go back and say, because you guys wanted criteria, because we didn't have criteria before, and you struggled without the criteria. Now that we have the criteria, sometimes it seems a little bit harsh in situations. Once again, no answer. So
no answer.
Right.
So somebody make a motion? No. I'm going to make a motion we accept.
Motion to grant the variance would be.
I'm going to make a motion we grant the variance.
And I will second that motion.
Do you want to do a roll call vote, Melanie?
What's that?
Melanie, you want to do a roll call vote?
Well, hang on
Is
just a
that read
second.
the motion?
Hang on. So
okay.
Mr. Gerber made a motion to approve the variance as stated. Second by Mr. Deach. Do we do the roll call vote first, or do we do the,
Well, discussion, any further discussion, and then
that's what I mean.
if there's no further discussion, roll call vote.
But I mean, do we have to go through each A, B, and C, and D, or?
Well, I think for this one, we've exhaustively discussed it. I think we can
That's what I mean.
pull enough out of it to write something for the findings of fact and conclusions, the law to be signed, whichever way you guys decide.
It's an opinion from the Morris Shanker School of Law. Is that,
So we have a motion by Mr. Durbin, second by Mr. Deach to approve the 1005 Bush Drive variance -38. Any question or comments or further discussion? Roll call vote?
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, we'll close the Board of Adjustment meeting
See you guys. Thanks, Jake. You're welcome.
and open up the regular meeting. And our first order of business will be our public hearing, Section 410 subdivision regulations, ADM-91.
Public hearing?
I'm trying to get it to load.
Are you having problems with the password too?
Hey, we're
I don't
going,
have-
Melody,
I can't get there.
Melody,
Scott, did you get the password?
Yes, I did, and I am
we're going as
connected,
fast as
thank
we
you.
can.
You. I'll see you later.
You'll deal with Kate later. That threat was on TV.
So is your password working?
Yes, I think that's been working great.
Is yours not working either?
I may be able to show my password.
Good evening again. This is a approval request for the revision of Chapter 410 subdivision regulations, ADM-91. It's in regards to sidewalks. And I'd like to ask to make part of the public hearing record, the municipal code by reference, planning and zoning report, and the public hearing notice.
Thank you, Mr. Hint. Anybody else here to speak on behalf of the public hearing for the Section 410 subdivision regulations? Hearing none, we'll close our public hearing and open up the regular planning and zoning meeting with minutes from July the 6th, 2017 meeting.
I was not at that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
I'd like to
Make a motion.
make the motion to accept the
Minutes as
minutes.
submitted. Motion by Mr. Cooper to approve the minutes as submitted. Any
Second.
second by Mr. Costello. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Abstain, I was absent.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
I was absent.
Mr. Gerlach?
Abstain, no, 6.
Motion passes 4-0. With 3 abstentions and 2 absent.
One vacancy.
And 1 vacancy. Which reminds me, we'd like to thank Mr. Schwab for all that he did for us while he was on the board, and we will miss him as he's had to step down from the boards at this time. So thank you, Keith Schwab, for your service. Next order of business will be Section 410 subdivision regulations, ADM-91.
Thank you.
This is the proposed revisions to Chapter 410, and it's specifically regarding sidewalks.
And is the intent basically to just kind of clarify where sidewalks need to be?
I believe, in meeting with staff and City Attorney Graville, it is to make sure that the code is clear on that, the city's desire to have the sidewalks, to make sure that we have everything in place, to make sure when we're approving plans or plats that if the sidewalk's not gonna be out in the street right away, if it's going on across private property, that from the start we have the easements and that it clearly says sidewalk and utility easement, so the city's not backtracking, somewhere down the line trying to negotiate or pay for easements. It was just clearing it up to make sure we've done everything we can to avoid future problems in the future for making sure that the sidewalk issue is resolved.
Because it didn't seem to change anything as far as where they're required and they've always been required on like site plans.
Yeah, I think really the concept here is in the Ruther subdivision, which got approved by the board on Tuesday night, they installed part of the sidewalk in themselves, and it practically didn't make sense for them to put it over the long expanse along 47, but we definitely want sidewalks there. Well, a contribution to the sidewalk fund alone means we have to come back and get the sidewalk easements. So this gives you guys the authority in recommending, because ultimately the Board of Aldermen under our ordinance is the only one that can grant the approval to pay into the sidewalk fund. It allows us to do what we did with Ruther, which is secure the sidewalk easement. So we have that in place, and we're not going back and trying to get it, because, a $6,000 payment into the sidewalk fund without an easement means we either have to be at their mercy in the future or go back and beg for it. And, or take it by eminent domain, which is not something we want to do. And it just really allows us to maybe be a little bit more flexible for the people like the Ruthers to get an easement dedicated, and really to make sure we're getting an easement dedicated, so that we can make sure we can maintain them and, lay them in the future or replace them and whatnot. So it was really kind of birthed out of the Ruther concept, because as you guys kind of came up with the concept of, well, let's make sure we get the easement at least, because quite honestly, the easement's probably more valuable than the payment of the sidewalk funds from the city perspective.
And we have other areas in town where there is no easement and no sidewalk, yet there's sidewalks on either side of that property.
Yeah, and we've done subdivisions where they paid in the sidewalk fund, and honestly, we've gotten people to put in sidewalks, and I don't know that we always got the easements as part of the follow-up, but really stressing that easement aspect of it, which came out of the Ruther one, which I think is just a good idea. And I think it gives a little bit more flexibility for like the Ruther subdivision, where it's like, hey, we'll put it on the one lot because that's not gonna change, but the other one, we don't wanna put, something in, that 5 years later, somebody buys it to develop it, and they rip the entire thing out, and either the city's paid it or the developers paid it. And I think the Ruthers, although I don't think they were happy, and I don't want to speak for them, I think it was ultimately a fair solution and a good way to resolve it, because they privately contracted, which was probably cheaper than it was for us to put it in. We got the easement we needed, so when we want to come back and build, and if we decide on our own, well, we know the land's not developed, but we want to put a sidewalk there anyway, we can put it in because we have the easement.
I think that's a
The
wonderful
previously
idea.
contributed sidewalk fund money, right?
Yeah, which I don't know, is there any money in that?
You would have to ask Ms. Gabriel Curry.
But I think it just, out of our discussion last time, it was like, this is a really good idea to make sure that we want the easements. That should be our priority as much as anything.
I'll make a motion to approve the change to section 410 subdivision regulations as submitted.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Castillo, second by Mrs. Scott to approve the section 410 subdivision regulations ADM-91 as submitted. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Gerloff?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 2 absent, 1 vacancy. We'll close the meeting this time and turn the floor over to Mr. Hemp for a report.
Really ain't got much. Running a little crazy.
Okay.
We are getting more people calling and more interest and asking questions for building permits and zoning regulations, so if half the calls come through, we're gonna be pretty busy here shortly.
Good.
I noticed that, oh, go ahead.
We still haven't heard back, haven't heard back about Dollar General going back on.
That was my question.
Yeah.
They tabled the July meeting, and they asked the table for this meeting, but
We've been working, they sent us a draft of the cross-access easement, and I gave them comments. Jack and I did a phone conference with them and their attorney, to kind of explain the reasoning of why the cross-access was requested for the southern part by planning and zoning, and, we'll see what they come back, when they come back with something on it. They really wanted to restrict competition in the cross-access. We said, you probably need to talk to the other property owner. We can't agree to restricting competition for you guys as part of your cross-access.
I just think if you're looking at traffic long-term, that's a very important piece of traffic flow, is that access.
Yeah, it's something, honestly, as we work on the outlet mall area, we really want to make sure we incorporate cross-access as those projects come across to, really get a good traffic flow and kind of learn from some of the places to the east what's good traffic flow and what's not.
Jack, do you have any feedback on the mall?
I ate dinner there tonight at the Mexican restaurant.
How was it?
No,
Lamoka?
I mean,
Haven't been down there yet.
in terms of rentals,
Well, I know since the furniture store went in, they've expanded. There was three grand openings, Melody, or 4.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The jewelry store, the banquet
Banquet
center, and the Mexican restaurant all recently had grand openings.
I think if your question is when are we gonna start seeing some, maybe, you know, not national, maybe some regional tenants and stuff like that, and get some ideas of what's going in there. There's a lot of inquiries about it, but we've been told by all the developers, the 3 developers that are affected by the overpass, that want, the people looking to come out here want to see ground broken. So I think we'll see a lot of movement. And I think that's probably true because it's been consistent from all of them. I think we'll start to see a lot of movement when we actually break ground on the overpass. We keep hearing, call us when dirt's moving.
And when's that scheduled?
MoDOT has already put it out for bid.
The notice to proceed will be the end of September.
We're pushing that project with MoDOT as quickly as possible.
They'll award it this month.
Surprising. It's pretty exciting to see it move so quick.
Cool. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Deep, second by
Second.
Mrs. Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks. See you next month.